Well, if you haven't heard about this yet, I regret to inform you, but the golden age of tabletop RPGs is dead. Why? Well, because author and D&D historian Ben Riggs says it is, so clearly I can no longer run my home game this Sunday, but instead will spend that time in weeping and mourning. Wait, what? Why is he saying this? Is he right? What is he basing this on? I'll try to answer those questions here. I'm Dave. This is the one and only RPG Rundown, and this video is... The Golden Age of RPGs is dead. Long live the Golden Age of RPGs. As you've probably heard by now, Ben Riggs, author of Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons, published a public essay which begins, "We are watching a bright and special time in the TTRPG industry pass away before our eyes." He's actually referring to the boom in just one game, Dungeons & Dragons. His entire orientation is around this product, and his presupposition is that for tabletop role-playing games to flourish at all, there must be one monolithic default publisher of one monolithic default game. His argument is based on the popularity of the OGL and the many third-party products that it has spawned, yet strangely he lumps in venerable popular games that have nothing to do with the OGL or D&D, like Call of Cthulhu, Deadlands, and Shadowrun. And not only that, these games are older even than the birth of the OGL. Here's another flaw I see in the speculation. The first OGL was part of 3rd edition D&D and debuted in 2000. Riggs, however, cites the golden age he's thinking of as beginning in the 2010s. Despite him mentioning these other games, the post is otherwise exclusively about the success of D&D during its 5th edition. He directly states, with no evidence, that this success was a rising tide that lifted all boats. The crux of his argument about why the Golden Age is dead is that creators like MCDM, Kobold Press, and Paizo are completely abandoning the OGL to go in their own entire directions, rather than publishing supplements for D&D, which is what made them successful in the first place. He also lumps Critical Role into this, since they have published their own gaming systems recently as well. He feels the further Critical Role strays from being exclusive about D&D, the worse this is for the RPG hobby in general, because we need that rising tide that D&D gives us. And we can see a problem here too, conflating things that directly have to do with using the OGL, like publishing adventures and supplements for 5e, with things that don't really work that way, like Pathfinder. He's worried, for example, about no longer being able to mingle 5e and Pathfinder content in the same game, and I'm wondering, who even does that? I've honestly never seen anybody on any platform talking about how to mix D&D and Pathfinder together in the same game, ever. I'm sure some people do it, but it can't be enough to affect the sales of Pathfinder now that Paizo has moved the game off of the OGL foundation. What Riggs is really saying is, the big boom in 5th edition D&D is probably over. He may or may not be right about that. As to his other main point, that this is bad for all tabletop role-playing games because we must have a big fish, universal system, well, I don't know about that. Pathfinder is mostly regarded as being more complex than D&D, but on the other hand, its bedrock is still rolling a d20, adding modifiers while trying to beat a target number. It has attributes, skills, saving throws, and so on. Yes, they differ in nuance. Yes, there are more rules that cover more things, but the basis will be very familiar to anyone who has played D&D for a good while. The same is true of the Valiant system from Kobold Press. And I can't say this enough. None of this has anything to do with so many small but successful games that don't use that foundational mechanic at all. The 2D20 games that flourished for quite a while, like the Star Trek RPG, which is still in print and popular, are fairly divergent from your classic D20 type of game, and even further are games that run on Powered by the Apocalypse or Year Zero, both systems that have been pretty successful in recent years. Then there's the explosion of popularity in Warhammer-related games like Wrath and Glory, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and the new Imperium Maledictum game. These games are very different from D&D in their mechanics, and they're doing quite well by all accounting. The fact is, D&D has seen waves of popularity come and go. That's just the nature of products like this. Just think of its popularity in the 80s. There were TV commercials, an entire wave of satanic panic over the game, and a major network D&D cartoon during a time when Saturday morning cartoon slots were coveted and rare and valuable. The game waned in popularity after that, but guess what? The core fandom of tabletop RPGs still played tabletop RPGs. Games like Cthulhu and Shadowrun and all of the others remain popular enough to stay in print, and they're still in print and played today. And really, it doesn't seem to me that the popularity of 5th edition resulted in some huge general RPG renaissance, getting new D&D players interested in crossing over to alternate games and systems. In fact, most of what I see online from game masters is this chronic problem that they can't get their 5e pals to play any other system. And let's consider Paizo, whom Riggs mentions several times. They began as a publisher of third-party D&D adventures, eventually relying on the OGL to do that. When 4th edition D&D came out, it divided fans quite a lot, and Paizo went and created their own entire game based on the OGL, which was the first edition of Pathfinder. And Pathfinder did really well. At one time, during the age of 4th edition D&D, it was said that Pathfinder gave D&D a run for its money as the top-selling fantasy tabletop RPG. I don't know how true or measurable that is, but I do know that Pathfinder is still around, now into what is basically its 3rd edition, whether or not they're calling it remastered. So splintering from beyond a third-party D&D creator to being a publisher of its own game system did not kill off tabletop role-playing. And I have a hard time believing that the recent changes in Pathfinder to divorce it from the OGL completely are going to hurt its sales either. In fact, it's likely that it boosted them, because by and large, Pathfinder players do not in any way think about the success of D&D and whether they should be playing Pathfinder based on how well D&D is doing. That, to me, seems especially far-fetched. Now, there's a whole world of tabletop RPGs that exist independently from D&D. Maybe they got a small boost in sales from D&D's recent stellar run, but I don't even know if that's true because I haven't seen compelling statistics that tell me one way or the other. And apparently, neither has Ben Riggs because, again, he doesn't cite any evidence for this. Above all, if you like tabletop RPGs, keep playing them. Ignore the noise. Support creators you like. We may or may not be seeing the end of the latest wave of D&D popularity, but tabletop RPGs are not going away anytime soon. This is a hot topic, of course, and I welcome a vigorous discussion in the comments. I just ask that you keep it civil and on topic. And until next time, no matter what kind of dice you're rolling, may all your successes be critical. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Of course, it always helps us out if you like and subscribe. And check this video's description for a link to a few other cool things from Game Talk Network. Links to other channels in the Game Talk Network, like the Board Game Rundown, the Miniatures Rundown, and the Lorcana Rundown. A link to our Patreon for the Game Talk Network, where RPG Rundown is one of the pledge levels you can select. And a link to our GTN Discord server. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.